Hi, everybody, and welcome to this TIA webinar, the case for data center certification. I'm Clarence Reynolds with TIA. The TIA 942 standard is the world's most popular data center standard, and it's used by well over 70% of facilities around the world. Data center stakeholders increasingly want to make sure their data center was designed, built, and approved as having met that TIA 942 criteria. And today we'll discuss the importance and benefits of TIA 942 certification as a precursor to 5G deployment. Let's start by having our panel introduce themselves, and we'll start with Jennifer.
Thank you, Clarence. My name is Jennifer Cooke. I'm a research director at IDC. For those not familiar, IDC is a global market research and consulting firm, and I'm one of probably 1,000 analysts, but I specifically focus on the data center space and customer challenges in building, managing their data centers. I guess on to the next panelist.
Good morning. My name is Harry Smeenk. I'm the Senior Vice President of Technology and Programs at TIA, Telecommunications Industry Association. And our major programs are around data centers, edge data centers, smart buildings, private networks, IoT, the oncoming 5G, and so forth. So glad to be on the panel this morning. Thank you.
Yeah, hello, my name is Edward Van Leent. I'm the Chairman and CEO for the EPI group of companies. We are the largest data center training provider globally, as well as the organization that provides data center auditing and certification.
Good morning, my name is Christophe Regla. I'm the President and CEO of Coaxis International. We specialize into hosting. We own and operate our own data center, and we specialize in client with high profile that needs criminal justice, HIPAA, GLBA, SOC 1 and 2, FISMA, and FedRAMP compliancy. So it's very important to us to have full redundancy on our data center. Thank you.
All right, fantastic. Let's start, Jennifer, if you can tell me how and why data centers are important to the overall network ecosystem.
Okay, thank you, Clarence. So we hear a lot about digital transformation, and really across all industries, there's not one that is untouched. They're undergoing massive transformation and change, all built around data. So a couple of examples that you hear of a lot are, Uber creating a new digital experience that really completely disrupted the transportation industry. Think of Netflix and how they changed everyone's expectations for on-demand entertainment. These are just a couple of, kind of common examples of how innovation has been disruptive, and it all relies on the network ecosystem. But we have a whole host of new innovation coming across all industries to deliver new digital experiences. And we're really on the precipice of a massive opportunity to deliver more personalized products and services, to improve outcomes and efficiency, and enable innovation and better experiences in general. And this massive potential for new digital services depends on having infrastructure and connectivity in the right places, and often in new places. So organizations, we are seeing them rapidly increase their investment in infrastructure that resides outside the walls of their own data center facilities. We see investment in creating their own private clouds in new locations and in critical edge locations to support this innovation. And when organizations are building this new foundation for innovation, they increasingly need to invest in having connectivity in new places, such as edge data centers. And why? It's not that just the edge and data centers in general are important. It's just they're really the essential building blocks. Performance and latency very quickly become life or death consequences. My teenager might say that if the Netflix account is having trouble connecting, that's life or death, but we call customer service. If your autonomous vehicle is having trouble connecting, you'll create a very dangerous situation for yourself and everyone in your path. The difference of milliseconds become very important. Those are some examples that are used a lot, but I'm based out of Boston. Boston is known for many things, one of which is having top surgeons around the world. And a use case that I recently heard of is a lot of innovation in new surgical practices, but the ability to deliver, that type of service to someone that lives in a country that does not have the same trained surgeons. There's so many innovations going on with being able to leverage the skills and expertise and the latest findings of a specific hospital and a specific surgeon in one area to a person that is in dire need, but not in the right location. So we're going to be hearing more and more about how all of this innovation depends upon the network and depends upon data centers. Some other examples are cruise ships and amusement parks using IoT technologies and data analytics to improve the entertainment and experience that you have on vacations. These become floating data centers, and innovations with smart cities, smart factories, smart grid, and a smart home. All these depend on having ubiquitous IT service. So in general, the massive transformation that all industries are experiencing is built on data, understanding and making better use of what you have, using data to improve. And this is making data centers and edge data centers not just important, but again, an essential foundation for all innovation.
Excellent. And because they are so ubiquitous, as you mentioned, Jennifer, I'd like to ask you, Edward, how are data centers measured for what is the most important thing, and that's their resiliency and efficiency?
Well, that's a good question, Clarence. Obviously, there is a big change happening in industry with the introduction of edge. Typically, if you look at, say, the traditional data centers and where we were measuring resiliency and efficiency, it's done very differently. Normally, we have a traditional data center where we often have a building envelope, and within there we have a computer room and all the supporting infrastructure. And traditionally, in those type of setups, when we looked at, say, resiliency, we normally would add extra distribution paths, or we would add additional equipment in the electrical, mechanical, and telecommunications infrastructure, and that was all within that single envelope of the building, so to speak. Now, in terms of edge data centers, this will be much more complex. We will still have edge data centers which will be housed in those traditional building infrastructures, but edge could also be as simple as a box hanging on a light pole, so to speak, and basically anything in between. So as a result of that, the way we would design for resilience would be potentially very different than a traditional data center, because you can imagine that if we have a box hanging on a light pole somewhere on the street, it will be virtually impossible to get to power grids connecting to that single box to create some power resiliency, for example. So in those type of environments in the edge, we might have to look at, say, a different type of resiliency implementation, and that could be that we're looking at, say, an overlap of 5G cells to, at least from an end user perspective, create some redundancy and resiliency, where if one of the edge would fail, that another one seamlessly takes over because we have overlapping cells. From an efficiency point of view, again, quite dramatic, because in terms of edge data centers, while they might be smaller than the traditional hyperscale data centers, but in terms of numbers, they will be much larger than traditional data centers. So as a total, in terms of power consumption, that will be vastly more than the traditional data centers potentially. So any loss that we would have in an edge data design, which might be replicated, 10,000 times, hanging on different types of pole, for example, would have a huge impact to the overall energy consumption in general. So that's why TA is currently working hard to extend the TA 942 standard to address all those resilience complexity as well as energy efficiency complexity, to create a quality benchmark for this new type of data centers.
So why then would measurement be important, Edward? How does the TI 942 standard categorize data centers through measurement?
Right. Well, measurement, I think in general is a very important factor anyway. If you look at, say, quality. All right, you can only measure quality by putting up certain levels of measurements. So that is where normally standards like what TIA develops come into play, as they typically define a very well structured approach to how things should be designed and define minimum quality levels against which products and, for example, data center implementations could be benchmarked. So the goal is obviously to create and to come to a predictable outcome. For example, in the TA 942, if you would design for a rated 3 data center, then everybody understands that that is a concurrent maintainable data center. There might be different type of implementations or how you achieve it, but the outcome for rated 3 is clearly defined. So in terms of the TA 942, in its current structure, we have rated 1 up to rated 4, rated 1 being a traditional basic type of data center serving what they call the capacity, but no redundancy or resiliency built in. Whereas for rated 4, which is the ultimate, you would have a fault tolerant type of design. Now, as I said, with traditional data centers, we normally do that with adding potentially equipment and distribution paths. But as I said, we're currently working hard in the technical committee to look at the mapping towards the edge data center technology, which is vastly different in that sense. So that is where we currently stand.
And Christoph, from the customer's point of view, you have had to go through the certification. Tell us about your company's experience with that data center certification.
Oh, okay, sure. Thank you. So basically, what we do here at Coaxis is we're hosting clients that have a need in high compliancy, and those compliancies are, criminal justice, medical, FedRAMP, which is a federal compliancy, and because we have to maintain those compliancy, we just can't use other people, data center, clearly. So what we had to do, basically, we had no choice, and we had to build our own data center. And because, those compliancy comes with contract we have, they have like 5 nines after the decimal in uptime. So we have to be up all the time. We have no choice in that matter. And because we have all those compliancy, we had to have, this data center. We work, worldwide, so we have no choice but to be up all the time. We have the data center is constantly used at any point of time. This is, basically, how we do things here. The fact that we have our own data center lead us to also, choose, the right, people to help us, and achieve, this kind of redundancy, basically.
So why, Christoph, did you start with the certification to the TI 942 standard? Because there are other options out there.
Well, yeah, you're right. There are other options actually, and as we're getting our compliancy, we had to get a compliancy now for a standard for our data center. Why did we choose TI 942? Great question. We done a lot of homework. We've done a lot of research because this a standard like that on a data center is not a small thing, and you cannot really make a mistake when you do this. So after a lot of homework consideration, we found out that TI 942 is actually the one that applies a standard. So basically, where you're going. And when we compared, other companies that is the same, we found out that, they're basically working into internal, compliancy on their own. So you really don't know what's going on. It's based on paperwork, a lot of money for the rating, and you really just don't know where you're going. So what I like, and the reason why we chose, TI 942 is because it's a standard, it's well established, and you exactly know what you need to do to get your data center up to par and up to the rating that you want to achieve, basically. And that's really the main focus that we deal with TI 942. It's something that you actually can understand and something that you can grasp on, compared to others to where they would tell you, I don't know if I have time to explain all that, but they would tell you, well, you might need this, you might need that, but it's not clear. There is no clear, focus, on what they want you to do. It's based upon what the internal policies are. And TI 942 is a standard. You just follow the standards, and there you go, basically. It's clear cut.
Excellent. And Harry, as of this year, the established the TIA actually established an official accreditation scheme for the TIA 942 based audits. Can you tell us about the roles of the various parties in that scheme?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And also, I just want to make a comment on what Christoph was saying. He mentioned 5.9 reliability, which is in the telecom and data center industry is pretty common knowledge. But what most people don't realize is that too is another TIA standard. That is TL 9000, and that's from our business performance group at TIA. So they're very closely linked, 942 and TL 9000. So just wanted to make that point. Also, to your question, Clarence, we had a lot of requests that came from the marketplace. We received a number of phone calls and emails from data center owners, data center operators, asking TIA, do you have a certification program? Can you put a TIA stamp of approval on my data center? And the answer to this point has been, we have the standard, but we didn't have a accreditation program around it. So that's what we've built, is an accreditation scheme. So your question of who the players are, there's a number of different players in this. So first is TIA and TIA's members. So we're a nonprofit membership-driven organization that has built the TIA standard, the TIA 942 standard, with our members, and they are constantly updating that standard. So they're a big part of it in maintaining the standard with the updates. The second group is TIA itself in working with our with the industry to build the accreditation scheme. And basically what we've done is we've started with ISO 17020 and or 17021 as the foundation for the accreditation scheme. And then there are a number of TIA specific requirements on top of that. And that's part of getting the next group of folks, who are the conformance assessment bodies, or CABs. And these are companies around the world that are capable and can become an assessment body to do the audits and be able to put the TIA certification stamp on it. So there's a process that they will go through to become a conformance assessment body. But once they're set up, then they're able to go do those audits around the world. And then the next group is a company called Certec that we, TIA is not in the business of doing certification audits or inspections. We don't have the manpower around the world to do that. That's why we wanted the conformance assessment bodies to come on board and do that for us. But in order to approve those conformance assessment bodies, we asked Certec to do that. And what they do is they review and accredit the CABs. They review and approve the TIA audits. They issue and control the use of the stamp. And they have taken on responsibility to manage and update and organize the TIA942.org website, which now is in control of TIA in terms of being able to register the buildings that have it, the data centers that have been audited, control of those dates, when re-audits or recertifications are required, and so forth. So that is the main players in the process.
And how, Harry, did the Certec partnership come about?
With Certec, what we were looking for was an independent yet very experienced organization that did not have any conflict of interest. And what I mean by that is that they're just in the business of certifying companies to do audits and inspections. So they're not in the business of doing audits themselves or doing consulting work or engineering work. That's strictly focused on the being able to certify companies to do the assessments.
So, and Harry, you mentioned 5.9s and having that kind of reliability. What role will data centers play in the deployment of 5G, which the uptime needs to be even more stringent? And that can be for anybody.
Yeah, so with 5G, data centers will still have a major role. I know some people think that edge data centers will take over for the larger data centers. I think it's our belief that they will coexist, and it's all based on use applications, use cases specific. So what Edward had mentioned earlier, the TIA 942, TR42 working group is working to upgrade with an addendum to the TIA 942 standard for edge data centers. And we see edge data centers as being a huge part of rolling out 5G and a big part of the whole next generation of networks.
Anybody else want to comment on that? So
I echo what Harry said, indeed, that it will be a hybrid type of environment with hyperscales in the back end for data analytics, potentially for future purpose, so to speak, and edge, all over the place, obviously provide the connectivity, especially with 5G being at the forefront there.
exactly. And Jennifer, why are we going to see this explosion of data centers? We're going to see the numbers grow. Why is that going to happen?
Yeah, we're going to see a real rebalancing. As Harry mentioned, the edge and the core will coexist. I mean, really, the vision is changing from, separate data centers to, instead of thinking edge and core, people are thinking of them now. The more mature organizations now thinking of them as pools of resources that they can use. So it's not that one is more important, one is less important. The idea is to be able to manage them centrally, think about them centrally, and that's where standardization really comes in as a critical piece in allowing that to happen. And just as far as how they're growing, edge data center resources and all data centers, they're growing to support the influence of data in every aspect of our work and life. The amount of data is growing exponentially, just staggering numbers, up each year by more than 25% on IDC's forecast. So by 2023, IDC's global data sphere is forecasting that the amount of data will be over 100 zettabytes. And where will it be stored? 40% will be outside of core data centers in endpoints and edge data centers, so 60% still in core and cloud. This will drive investment in making those edge data centers more secure, more reliable. It also requires resources and expertise in gathering, analyzing, leveraging, and moving data. Again, in a seamless, frictionless way from core to edge. And the way that all this data at the edge will be analyzed, stored, protected, and leveraged will include a wide variety of data center types, including cloud data centers, traditional company-owned data centers, what IDC calls internal data centers, data centers at the base of cell towers, standalone containers, wall-mounted units on factory floors to optimize operations, in hospitals, along train tracks, in cruise ships and cars. So the massive digitalization and leveraging data to transform business processes and the way we make decisions, it's all based on data, and it's really the lifeblood of innovation. And the entire perception of a data center is changing. So in a way, the data center is now a little bit of a misnomer because we're thinking of it as pools of resources. And one of the things that IDC does every year, like many analyst firms, is we come up with predictions for the future. And in our upcoming 2020 Futurescape, so I'm giving a little bit of a preview of it, one of the 10 major data center predictions relates to the shift in where data lives. By 2023, IDC predicts that 50% or half of new infrastructure deployed will be in critical edge locations rather than corporate data centers. And today it's at about 10%. So in just 3 years, we're looking at about half of new infrastructure will be, outside of the core data centers today. And the impact on the IT organization will be significant. This shift, it introduces a lot of risk in both physical and data security, where infrastructure is distributed in locations other than the core data center where many of the IT organization staff resides. So this is going to put a real strain on internal IT skill sets and just their physical ability to manage equipment. It's going to put a significant strain on processes to protect as well as leverage data. So IDC's recommendation is that organizations adopt processes that are doable to improve asset management and data governance, and adhere to standards as assets are increasingly in remote locations.
Excellent. Harry, I'm curious to know, does this certification program create sort of a blueprint for establishing similar programs for technology that may be outside of data centers?
Yeah, actually, it's a very good question, Clarence, and thank you. It does. And if you look at, TIA, again, it's a nonprofit industry association. So what we do for the industry is pull together, first of all, the development of standards and policy and regulatory recommendations, as the foundation, and we build those frameworks. And from there, we get into benchmarking and providing information back to the industry of how does your solution compare with other solutions, just on a very generic level. So benchmarking, the TL9000 program I mentioned earlier, all of that leads to assessment capabilities, certification capabilities, and registration capabilities. And data centers is an integral part of what TIA does, but as we've already talked about today, edge data centers will require some level of measurement, assessment, and certification. We're still working on, what those ratings will look like and the various types that Jennifer talked to in terms of whether they're cookie cutter or whether they're customized, may have different requirements. So the members in the team are working on that. But we also see a huge opportunity in benchmarking, assessment, and certification with smart buildings. As again, everybody knows, the 942 standard plays a big part in buildings as well, with structured cabling as the foundation. So we're working with our partners like UL and our members to develop a criteria that then can be used to assess a building and be able to certify it as a level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4 smart building, and then be able to register that. So there's a couple of areas. We're also looking at, with our service performance program, how to measure network performance and network reliability beyond the 5 nines. As we progress towards 5G, 5 nines will not cut it. It's going to have to be a virtualized redundant network where no outages are acceptable. So we're looking at ways to measure and certify networks. And then the last item is a lot of what we are seeing with buildings and with the evolution of the network is the move towards private networks. And some of those are edge data centers in themselves. Some of them are just private networks. But those two will require some level of benchmarking, assessment, and certification.
Well, excellent. Thank you so much, Edward and Jennifer, Harry, Christoph, for providing your expertise and knowledge. And thank you to the audience who has joined us. And if you would like more information, of course, you can contact us here at the Telecommunications Industry Association. And have a great day, everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.